Hello, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Patrick.
And today we're joined by a man who must have an extraordinarily large fire at home, because from reading his CV of such, seems to be a lot of irons in it.
Yeah.
We are joined by Chris Handley.
Hi, good to see you.
I like that. That was good.
Thank you very much. I was thinking about that on the way here. If my journey had been a lot shorter, I wouldn't have come up with that. With it being 35 minutes, I can get it in.
Yeah.
In time. So, Chris, I could bumble my way through and explain all of the things that you're into, but I think it'd be much better if you did it.
Yeah, okay.
So tell us what you do and what has brought you to this show.
So I freelance write for Cubicle 7 for the Warhammer RPGs. I also freelance write for Steamforged Games. Previously would have been Privateer Press for Iron Kingdoms. I've written for a few other RPGs, notably like Vampire the Masquerade. I've done some work that's recently for Cult, which has got a Kickstarter going on right now, which is kind of like horror, kind of Gnostic, it's Hellraiser the RPG. Basically.
Oh wow, that sounds good.
Good fun. And
only if you get to dress up though.
And then, so basically, mainly I work in RPGs, but I have dabbled with wargaming as well. So back in the day, I did. I co-designed and wrote the 3rd edition of Noble Armada, which is a space combat game, which is based on the Fading Suns RPG.
Right.
So again, that's some of the writers that used to work on Vampire and those type of games went off and created their own company and made a setting which was rather Dune-like.
Yeah.
And then you've got spaceships and that, and giant space gates. So there's a space combat game for that. And then as well, painting toy soldiers along the way. And most of all this stuff is more recent with the writing. So I've been doing that for maybe the last, 7 years.
Right.
Is with the freelance writing. And of course, I'm well into the war games because, of course, if you're into Warhammer, you paint toy soldiers because you go, I want to have nice miniatures to represent both the characters and play those armies. And Iron Kingdoms is also the same because there's a whole war game, which is rather popular right now.
Yes.
So, I've been writing a few of these. And so I've got a few books here which are published for Iron Kingdoms that I've worked on. Then there's Wrath and Glory. I've also worked on Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I've also worked on The Old World, and I've also worked on Age of Sigmar. So I've not worked on Imperium Maledictum, which is the other 40k RPG.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of what I do, and that's not my day job. My day job is a software engineer via previously being an academic.
So you have that special machine that you have a 35-hour day that the rest of us can't manage, because I'm not sure when you're getting all of this done.
Yeah, I put in extra hours where I have a laptop stuck on my lap in front of the TV while watching whatever and writing about Space Marines or warjacks and stuff.
So I tried to do that yesterday evening whilst watching Inside Number 9 and writing some plans and content, and failed miserably and ended up watching the telly instead. So I had to turn it off and.
I'm so massively easily distracted by anything. I'm awful.
Yeah.
The one great thing I have is that when I do most of my painting, I paint in my barbershop.
Yeah.
And I'll have the telly on. And I realise that although I'm glancing down and painting my miniatures, I realise that whatever I'm watching better, because I can't be on my phone because I'm watching it on my phone.
Yeah.
So, so hats off to you, because I just can't concentrate. Like the idea of watching the telly and hammering away.
I think it helps that a lot of TV these days is being designed for double screening.
Second screen, yeah.
So I think it's telling that there are certainly films and TV series that I will watch where it's clearly designed for that, and then there's those that I will watch where it's not designed for that, because the characters aren't saying exactly what they're bloody doing all the time. They'll be like, "Oh, I'm off to do this," and you're like, "Right, I don't need to watch the screen for that. They're off to do that."
Yeah.
Oh, I'm talking to you, and I've said your name. Oh, right, that's who they're talking to. Whereas we've been re-watching recently Mad Men. That does not happen because it's pre that dual screening.
It's a funny one, isn't it, dual screening, and the fact that they make television to accommodate it, you go, well, that's quite clever, but at the same point in time, you go, it's a sad world we live in that we have to do that.
Listen to a podcast or something at that point.
It's and like I say, I'm terrible for it. When I'm painting, if I'm watching something, I'll look up and go, right, they're all in the room I now know what they all sound like, and now I can, you know, and then I go, and then it just turns into the Archers for 5 minutes as like I'm listening to a radio play, and then I go, all right, he's now left the room and he's entered the room, or, you know, they're driving to here.
I had a moment the other day, like quite often if I'm doing sort of like boring bits of editing, like culling clips and bits and bobs, I might stick something on just to fill the void, and some sort of there was I can't even remember the name of the show or any of the characters' names, and this lady was a crash investigator, or something along those lines. A plane went missing, and then in the second season, it's like Under Siege, it was a train.
Right.
And then there was, I don't know, some episode, some plot point where it was like, oh no, we need to go and meet with this person again, and I was like, who is that person? And I looked at the screen, and then very luckily it turned to black and white and showed a slow-mo sort of shot of the character that they were going to see.
To give you enough time to look up, to go back and do what you're doing.
Oh, it was that guy. I'm part of the problem.
It doesn't work well for anime, though, because I've been watching a lot of... I've been catching up on, like, the older Gundam series.
Oh, yeah.
And so on Crunchyroll, like, some of those are not dubbed, and it's hard going. But the plot, let's just be honest, like, early Gundam, you know, there isn't that much going on with the plot. It's just like... young person in a Gundam committing war crimes, being upset about family are dead or something else, and they're being attacked by the bad guys yet again, is pretty much it. And it shows. Like I've been watching. So I've watched the original Gundam. Okay, fine. It is what it is. It's a thing of its time period. I watched Zeta Gundam, which was by comparison even sadder as a series.
Oh dear.
As in, like, it was just like the main character was going through a lot of crap. And then I've had whiplash watching Double Zeta, which is a direct continuation of that one, because it's all Universal Century. And it's gone from being like a really serious kind of like Gundam series to this bunch of freaking kids are so annoying. I'm done with. And it's just like, tonally, it's such a shift. Whereas, like, you know, I've watched all of like Gundam Wing, which you just like, Hiroyui just hates his Gundam and he wants it to blow up all the time. Is pretty much the plot of that one.
Cool.
Iron-Blooded Orphans is peak Gundam for me, because it's actually got proper politics going on in it.
Very good.
So I highly recommend that. But yeah, watching old Gundam is
They love their
hard.
angst, don't they? The Japanese one.
Oh,
they
yes.
love it.
Yeah.
You know, if it was made in the UK and everybody who drove a Gundam was about a 45-year-old male alcoholic.
Yes.
Just getting into it again and go, oh, right then, let's
and then
go.
if they were made to the quality of like Morris Minors back in the day, and you'd be like, oh, it's a Friday afternoon, I'll just put 3 screws in instead of 4, or something along those lines.
Right.
I feel like we've gone off
as we always
already.
do.
We talked about Mecha anyway.
Yes, anyway, we got
did.
that started.
So you're obviously involved in so many RPGs. I see you on the Discord propping up the other gaming channel. Where did your RPG journey begin?
Well, that happens way back in deepest, darkest Herefordshire, as always, most good stories do.
Wonderful.
So essentially, it's kind of like that thing of like where your friend gets for Christmas Warhammer 40,000 second edition back in like what, 1994-ish?
Yeah, probably about that. Yeah.
And then off the back, you get playing with that. You don't buy your own miniatures at that point. Then Necromunda comes out, and then you're hardcore into that. And then one day, my mum comes back from Hereford with a box with her, which is the D&D, classic D&D black box with a red dragon on the front. Yeah. And it has like a little map and really crappy miniatures in it. And that's where my role-play game kind of like enjoyment spawned from. And then as you get into that, there was... we played that to destruction, and you're drawing maps and grids and classic dungeons.
Yeah.
And then there was Arcane magazine. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember Arcane magazine. Yeah.
That ran for about, maybe 15 issues. And suddenly the world is like explodes even further. And you're like, oh my God, there are so many role-play games out there. So many other war games out there.
Yeah.
Because then you get exposed to things like Battletech through that, all the card games, so Magic the Gathering, and so I got into that. And from that then it's like, it's pretty much, downhill. You're like, okay, Star Wars 2nd Edition revised by West End Games. Brilliant role-play game for the time, and also did a lot of heavy lifting. So all the stuff that we know from Star Wars these days, the expanded universe, that was all done through the role-play game.
Oh, fantastic.
That's where I think that's how they even came up with the name that Twi'leks are called Twi'leks. All of that was done through their RPG.
Oh, wow.
And then went into the novels. And then obviously Disney's done what it's done these days.
It's the same as well with, I was at Star Wars, I played Star Wars CCG.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing as well, where there was things in that where you went, that wasn't a thing, but then they made it a thing because they obviously want to keep printing cards, because they print a card for everything we know, and then you need to keep going. So they started printing other cards, and then the next thing you know, you see that become a main, like, you know, snow speeders aren't snow speeders. They can speed anywhere, not just snow.
Right.
They're just snow speeders because they've been adapted for the cold. And then it was like, here you go. Here's a slightly yellowy one. Here's a sand speeder. And it was like, you know, and then next thing you know, you get to the Kenobi TV series, and there's speeders, and they're not in the snow. It's just, you know, they just become a general vehicle. And I think some of these things help out a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a good example of how I think in the industry, in like gaming, and I mean, we're in that age of transmedia where like, oh, it's got a game and a film and a blah-de, blah-de, blah. Role-play games, I guess, for a company, it's a fairly inexpensive way to further develop the IP and fill in some gaps, because it allows you to start answering questions. I mean, this obviously happened with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay in its first edition. Yeah, Graham Davis and the team having to answer a lot of questions about the pantheon of the gods. Who are they, and all of that. And same with Age of Sigmar Soulbound. I didn't work on the core book for that, but again, they're like answering questions like, where are the farms? We haven't seen that yet in Age of Sigmar. Where are the bloody farms? Where do they get water from? What are they? What are the trade routes? How do they live their lives? What is regular Joe's life in the magical post-apocalyptic setting of Age of Sigmar? Because that's what it basically is.
Yeah.
So roleplay games are really good for that. And you know, when you get to write for a roleplay game, you do get to start answering those questions, and you have to ask a dev. You develop your line dev. You ask, how does this work? And then, we don't know, make it up, like figure it out. And then you're like, it gets a bit more tricky depending upon who you're working with. So if it's a Games Workshop product, obviously it's going to go back up the line and has to be approved.
Yeah.
Whereas with Iron Kingdoms, my line dev has been, we've done a lot of retconning, because, you know, we're now 20 years into Iron King, you know, over 20 years into Iron Kingdoms. So there's a lot of stuff from first edition that our line dev said, nah, that's sexist crap. We're getting rid of that in the game. We're going to rewrite that and so forth. So it's very interesting working on licensed products, and the same with like Vampire the Masquerade. That's been going since 1996. That first edition came out. So again, that's gone through various iterations, and you've got approval to be done, and obviously that gets even tighter when they're trying to make TV series based on it, or they've got a video game coming out. But ultimately, RPGs are quite let's admit, they're a cheap way for companies to develop IP.
Yeah, and it was a friend of mine going right back when they brought out Inquisitor.
Yeah, amazing.
And a friend of mine bought that, and I said, "Oh, are you going to play the game?" And he went, "No, absolutely no interest in playing the game, but I know RPGs are a good place to find out more that you don't know, especially because obviously before Inquisitor, and I think I'm right when I say this, before Inquisitor, there was no Death Watch Marines.
No,
they started there. They suddenly
Gary Morley miniature.
Yeah, they suddenly became a thing when they went.
What's his name? Brother Artemis, I think.
Yeah, and they just went bang. There you go. There is also a Special Forces version.
Death Cult Assassins didn't exist. I don't think existed before then.
So loads of things that just, you know, and my friend said, I'm just buying the book because he says, I know it will fill in the gaps. I've no interest in playing the game.
And the DNA of Inquisitor is important, because all of those inquisitorial factions, we're not talking about the Ordos, we're talking about all the assholes in there, you know, the Parisians, I can't remember all their names, there's so many of them, but they've all got different philosophies on how the Imperium should operate, or the very nature of the God Emperor of mankind. That's all now in Imperium Maledictum, and there's even more of these factions in there. You're like, oh wow, they all just want to screw around in different ways, and you can play those. So Imperium Maledictum was a really great game for really getting into the nuts and bolts of how the Imperium operates.
Yeah.
So, and of course, not being at the front lines all the time, and that's why it's a very different game to this one.
Yes. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, absolutely. Like my introduction to sort of tabletop gaming was through roleplay, like D&D. So Wrath and Glory really, really interests me because I think like I really, really want to do it. I was like, if I want to do it, I'll probably have to sort of like DM a game. I'm going to listen to some Black Library novels, and then now I think I'm on like, my 20th novel or something like that. That just started down a rabbit hole. It really, really interests me because I think my sort of favorite thing I want to know more about is like life in the Imperium. I think that's what interests me the most.
Because the war games really give a very limited view of these worlds.
Oh, very limited.
You're right at the very edges of the societies where societies are butting up against each other. And so a lot of the things that you consider the norm of Warhammer 40,000, the average Imperial citizen has never seen or heard of a Necron.
Yeah.
Eldari are maybe this rumoured untrustworthy race out there. Orcs more than likely are accepted as being out and about, but again, most people don't come into contact with.
Yeah.
Which means those threats, which kind of you go, well, if you know these threats are there, that kind of reinforces the faith of why you should adhere to the Imperial Creed and the Emperor and so forth. But when you're not exposed to those, or you don't even, Chaos Space Marines, like, you've read Eisenhorn.
Yeah.
They see, in the first book, they see one Chaos Space Marine and they shit themselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's that one guy.
And that, I love that scene. Because
I'm a big fan of that.
They just see the one.
Yeah.
And looking at it makes them all feel sick.
Yeah.
All the symbols, they're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
And that really, for me, changed the way I thought about
You
the
realise
setting.
chaos is just like, it just permeates in, and it's like, it's in, whichever one, it might be the Guns of Tanith, when they're trying to take this world that is full of like refineries.
Yes.
And they're sneaking amongst the workforce. The workforce, they're sneaking amongst the Tanith, are sneaking through them, but they're constantly just being battered with chaotic stuff coming through over a megaphone, and and it's like whenever they heard corn being said, it's literally like a revulsion. It's like, and I think. And I think as well, I think the problem being as well is when you look at 40k through 40k is that planets are about that big, aren't they?
Yeah.
They don't really discuss the idea of countries and things, which is, again, I always think is the problem with Star Wars. In Star Wars, they talk about planets, but the planets are almost basically just cities, aren't they? They don't talk about what's on the other side of there, or and it's like, and 40k is very, very, and I understand that you can't play a game of 40k. And, you have to put in rules for Blummin whether a motorway was busy. I get it, but you know what I mean? I understand it, but you do sometimes come away a bit wanting, don't you? And I don't feel like
those roadworks on the space
so wouldn't that be hilarious if the Land Raider was going somewhere and then found out that there was a massive big bit of, single lane, 5 o'clock, what was I thinking?
That's why Necromunda's really good war game, because again, it represents such a narrow slice of the 40k universe, and it gives you a sense that what the regular Imperial citizen is up against, and how even chaos can't be so overt, because the moment you see it, everyone's going to try and eliminate it. So it has to be very under the radar. It might be spoken about as, like, if you're, say, on a different world. I think actually it happens in one of the, is it in the Magos omnibus for Eisenhorn? There's a chaos cult that is it's a chaos cult, but on the outside it looks like it's a hunting lodge, or I think it's maybe a venerating like pigs, like a pig god.
Oh, that sounds really familiar.
You've got these backwater religions that actually are fronts for which chaos is able to work through.
I sometimes think these are you get the impression sometimes in the backwater religions, they don't even know they're in a chaotic religion. They just go,
Whereas some of them are backwater and actually are venerating the Emperor in their own weird
and wonderful way,
because they've been cut off for maybe a good 100, 200, 300 years. So those little things are really interesting, because even the idea that an imperial religion, a local religion, has gone off on a tangent, even that is open to going, I think you're heretics. Like, no, they're actually most probably more more faithful than you are anymore, because again, you sometimes get tangents where you're still within the society and it evolves, whereas they're kind of like this little pocket version that doesn't progress anymore because it's been kept localized.
I do think the idea of being able to look into the background of these things and push how they go, and like I say, he's saying about Necrons and things like that, the average citizen doesn't know about it. I get the impression with a lot of these planets like that, by the time the average citizen becomes aware of Tyranids or Necrons or Dark Eldar, it's too late.
Oh yeah.
By the time you know about what they are, your head's on a spike, isn't it? Or
then if you do survive it, the Inquisition will come along and kill you anyway.
Oh, yeah, quite probably, because you know too much. Absolutely right.
You've had a peek behind the curtain.
But and I think being able to expand it, but also not throw too much at it, I think is a real difficult balance. Because I was thinking about this. Dan Abnett, 16 Gaunt's Ghost novels, I think there is.
My God, is it
and
16?
I'm on about number 8 at the moment. I think I might be on. I'm on Traitor General, and I think I've only heard about you've seen one Dark Eldar who's turned up as a group of assassins, one Dark Eldar, and then Gaunt recollects to haven't come into contact with them before.
Oh, okay.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And there's no one's talking about Necrons or Orcs or anything else. And there is that short story in the Eisenhorn where an Orc accidentally comes through a portal.
Yeah.
And it's just,
it's
at first they don't describe him as an Orc. They just describe it as this enormous thing that's just mashing humans.
Happens to be green. That's it. That's the only
they don't really talk about it being an Orc. And I think, and I think that's brilliant that they keep it quite vague.
Yeah.
But you think, to be able to write that much and go.
It's the same with, it's actually also the same with writing for Warhammer Fantasy again, because we get, because the war game is like, there's all these mass battles going on all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, most of the time it's quite peaceful in the Empire and the Old World. You're looking at these flashpoints when stuff goes down, and having written for the Old World RPG as well. Again, part of that setting is that it's before the Great Invasion of Chaos, which is, what's his name? Something Kassavar. I can't remember what the guy is. But he's the one that comes along, screws up Prague, invades, and Magnus the Pious has to defeat. But you're in this lull point where the vampire wars have all been and gone. So vampires are not everywhere trying to take over the Empire. Skaven are pretty much, it's been a while since the Skaven Wars. So Skaven are pretty much a myth again. Yeah. And you're in a setting which doesn't have good technology. All those books, all that knowledge disappears. And if you do know that knowledge, you're mostly going to be killed by someone for being a heretic. So, and even in that setting, it's quite interesting because Sigmar is not even isn't the main faith of the Empire yet. It's still, what's his name? Can't remember. What's the other pantheon in, the wolf god in Warhammer Fantasy?
Oh, you're asking the wrong one. I was going to say you're asking the wrong man there.
So that's why writing for the Old World's been really interesting, because it's so different. It's good 200 years in the past, yet it's so different to Warhammer Fantasy. Like, you don't have the schools of magic. All the things you accept about Warhammer Fantasy are just not established yet because of the timeline.
And does that make it? Does that give you freedom, or does it become more difficult because you haven't got something that you can refer back to?
There's a degree of freedom because in a recent interview, Dom, who owns Cubicle 7, and Podrick, who's the line developer for Old World and main developer for all the Warhammer games, they said, like, there's a freedom because though we're using a specific town or township called Talagard, which is in Talabakheim or Talabak Land. Yeah, that's one. These places get burnt down so often through history. So you go, well, there's that shop down the road there. It's like, no, wrong time, mate. Wrong time. It's been burnt 5 times. It's not there. So that's where you've got some narrative freedom to engage with that. And again, like, there's always the thing of, like, you can make the game your own because there's so many unreliable narrators in these settings.
Yeah.
It's built in that there's the canon to the settings, and then there's canon to the settings. There isn't. It's like 40k. What's canon? Well, depends who you ask on which day.
Yeah, and the problem you got with 40k is the fact that you go, what's canon, what isn't. You go, well, let's first establish what time of the day is it, and what year is it, because no one can quite make their minds up with any of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know what I mean. So it's going, you can take a lot of it with.
And with Age of Sigmar, you get again. There's a lot of scope with that, because again, Games Workshop is really only in exploring that setting, and it's purposely designed for that. They've only looked at like a few places. This subsection of the Realm of Fire, a little bit of the Realm of Death, like Orphan Khan and so forth. Then maybe a bit of the Realm of Beasts and so forth. So you can look at these large planes, going, actually, we're going to set the game there.
Which is good, because I think sometimes if you take 40k as its main in its tabletop variant, they do play it safe a lot of the time. Are we going back? We're going back to Armageddon again, and you're going, for somewhere that explains the fact there's human beings over thousands upon thousands of planets. They seem to keep getting upset about these particular planets.
Cadia's gone.
Yeah, and I was really impressed when they got rid of Cadia, because I thought that for a game that keeps going back to these established places, to actually go, no, we're getting rid of there. Especially when we're going, no, we're getting rid of there, and they are really the main plastic for playing Imperial Guard, to then go, gone. I thought that was quite brave for them.
And then with Iron Kingdoms is a different one, because we get to, with the RPGs, they're set in the time periods between the wargame editions. So those are meant to be the periods of peacetime.
Oh, fantastic!
The kingdoms.
Okay.
So we get a lot of scope to explore the cities, the world there. So like for Nightmare Empire, along with designing character types for it, I basically wrote a whole section on like, what is it like to live as these people that live on the Shard Isle? So it's very much like kind of whalers, fishermen, like in the fjords, and explore what their society is like and build that out. So, and that's maybe because between the settings, Iron Kingdoms is maybe not as developed, but it is still rather fleshed out, and we do get to play with some of the characters in that. And Iron Kingdoms is an interesting war game setting, or Warmachine in general, because characters die in this game setting. There are many of the characters we know from first, second, and third edition are dead as a doornail. They are gone. You can still get the miniatures for. Well, there are miniatures for them if you've played the previous edition. You can play legacy armies, but no, they are dead
in the canon, just gone.
What's his name? Stryker was the original warcaster for Sigmar in the first edition.
Right,
he's dead, because there was like this huge infernal invasion. No, there was a nice way of just like cleaning house and just being like, right, okay, let's reestablish what's going on by doing a massive kind of apocalyptic event, which contrasts quite differently to the GW way of doing like Storm of Chaos or the equivalent, where it's like, oh, it's happened, but it's like, well, it doesn't really change much.
More of a whimper than a bang, isn't it? And
I was going to ask with because for my sins, I feel like I'm still in my sort of like introductory. Did a little bit of D&D, got into Warhammer, and then now I'm at the precipice of like,
what is Warmachine?
Going out and looking at going, oh yeah, other plastic miniatures and resin miniatures exist. These look fun. How was that received by the community in comparison to, say, like blowing up the old world?
I think in the RPG and the game, I think it's a mixed bag. I think people are getting the core game of Warmachine. So this is the first edition rulebook from like 2003.
Yeah.
And if you compare like how the stats look and how they're presented compared to like what is in the app now, it's pretty much one for one. They've shaved off all the kind of niggles that are in that game where you were like, oh, you had to give orders to the units to charge. There was psychology and fear and all that stuff. That's all. They've trimmed the game down to its core thing, so it's more fun to play. Because, when half your army legs it.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with Old World as a war game.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've altered how fleeing from combat's changed. So Warmachine at heart has remained the same. That's why I find coming back to it again for a fourth time with this edition, it's been really fun to get reacquainted with it and see how fast it plays. as for how the community, it's the same with anything. Like, I know there's complexities with businesses of why you changed their miniatures ranges, but if you're going to sell to people, you need to sell something, right? And if they've already got all the miniatures and a well-developed second-hand market because of what tournament players are like, you're going to have to go, well, we're going to make new miniatures.
Yeah.
And you can't support all the old miniatures to make the game balanced. Something's going to have to give.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people are getting happier with it now that there are more things coming out. The legacy armies are still supported in the app more or less. Some things aren't in there. And you've got characters returning like Magnus, who is been in since first edition.
This big guy here.
That's his Invictus Warjack. Oh, God. I mean, I can't remember how much you chatted to Matt about what the Warmachine setting's like.
We
not horrendous amounts.
We talked about Warmachine as a whole and less about the individual elements of it.
Yeah, so my way of describing Warmachine is it's a kind of like post-Napoleonic era. So you've still got trench warfare going on. You've still got bolt-action rifles developed and so forth, or muskets.
Yeah.
But you've also got some fantasy elements that we think of kind of a bit Tolkien-esque, like elves and goblins, with a twist, obviously. And then the main thing is these warjacks, which are a fusion of magic with steam power, or in the case of Sigmar now, they're going galvanic, so they're going with electricity.
Oh,
the cities are getting getting lights, like electric lights as well. So it's kind of got that Jules Verne element to it of how Paris developed.
Yeah.
And then into that, you've got the warfare between these kingdoms. The Kador are very kind of like Slavic styled. Sigmar is our kind of maybe a bit North American, like pre-Civil War kind of element to it.
Yeah.
Plus with, you've got gun mages. They feel very 18th century. Yeah. 1800s. Yeah, kind of feel to it. And again, electrification. So their warjacks feeling more and more high-tech compared to other factions. Cricks are undead faction, which fuse Warmachine technology, warjack technology with necromancy to create necrotech. They use a wonderful fuel that's not coal. It's called necrotite. So they basically mine it from where wars and mass graves are. So it's this death energy is coalesced into a form of coal. It's very polluting when you burn it. It burns hotter, faster, but it's very polluting. And there's a whole timeline of things. So there's a good, if you go into the books, there's a good 10,000 years of history of where the gods are, what they've done, where magic came from, the fact that the elven gods are dead because they got sold off to the infernals to give humans the gift of magic. That's why you have warcasters. So warcasters are magic users, but they can bind themselves to the warjacks, and so they're an extension of their will.
Oh, right.
So they see through their eyes and make them do stuff. And then they can instill more magical energy into them to get them to do more stuff. Whereas the flip side is, so this Scorn set is from the 3rd edition starter, and Scorn are a bit dark elfy in that way, a bit vampiric in their magic. But you get warlocks and war beasts, so they're kind of like the wilderness reflection of warjacks, and so they put their minds into war beasts, they slave them or control them, and from that they also unlock the innate magic within the war beasts. And the game revolves around that. So, the core of your game is about picking your warcaster or your warlock, picking the warjacks that they're going to synergize well with, and then picking the units and solos. And it means you can have a range of miniatures like I've got. I've got 3 whole armies, sorry. More if I finally get around to stripping and repainting all my Scorn. And depending on what warcaster or warlock you use, it totally changes the tactics. So, say, for example, Kane here is a very shooty, kind of very fast-moving teleportation, a bit of an assassin, essentially.
Yeah.
And so the gameplay for him is to take out the enemy warlock or warcaster, because then the game is basically over at that point when you kill the opponent's leader.
Yeah.
But if you change that out for one of the other warcasters in the game, he wants to use all his magical resource, the tokens that you use in the game, to power his spells. A different warcaster might go, I'm going to put it on these warjacks to get them to do stuff.
Yeah.
Or another one might go, I'm actually quite good with units of troops, like people, and giving them orders and empowering them. So you can have you've got your same collection, pick a different warcaster, your gameplay tactics, totally different. And that, I think, makes the game still stand out compared to other stuff on the market.
So I've now described it, and people who might not, or it'd be something they haven't cast an eye over before, go, what's the average sort of model count for for an army?
So the starter set there, I think Matt brought in some painted miniatures, and that's my second copy that I'm going to do paint up in a for a painting guide at some point. That has 2 factions in there, which are called starter cadres, command cadres. So that's each one is like 30 points, and a game of Warmachine can be anywhere between 30 points, or you can play 50 points, you can play 75, or you can play 100. So that's within the app. You can pick these point values, and you build your army to that. And the game doesn't actually change in how it operates as you scale up. You've just got maybe more warjacks, maybe more units.
That was going to be my next question, because I know 40k is balanced at like 2,000 points.
Yeah,
and you can play less, but doesn't. No,
if you play with what's in there and you play a bigger game, the only difference is you've just got more units to move. The actual, you know how I said like your warcasters have this resource to these focus points. So you get maybe 6 on Kane, and maybe another one might be 7. You have to distribute those to power up your warjacks at the start of a turn. So when you're playing a bigger game, you're generally not going to have too many more warjacks. You're just going to have more units. Your units aren't increasing your resource allocation game. So that core element of how the game operates is the same no matter what scale of game you're playing.
Yeah.
Unless, say, you play a really big game, you go, we're going to have 2 warcasters aside, just so you can have more warjacks and war beasts, because who doesn't want to have burly things fighting? And then on top of that, the way, so I've written on my own personal blog, like how the game mechanics, kind of a quick overview of the game mechanics. The only difference between Kane and, say, one of the Black 13th is that he has focus manipulation to control warjacks. Otherwise, the rule systems for him are the same.
Yeah.
They're the same for the warjacks as well. The only difference for them is, like a warcaster, they can spend focus points to boost their attacks, to get an extra die on an attack roll, get an extra die on a damage roll, or to buy more attacks or do some special thing. So the game is quite homogenous in how the mechanics work, and there's the few little nuances that just point out that's how a warcast works, that's how a war beast works, etc. And I find it quite accessible because it's a dice pool system. It's 2d6. You're not rolling buckets of dice. You're just rolling 2d6. So you might go, that shot with my warcaster, I need it to hit. I'll spend a focus point and get an extra die. So you're shifting bell curves. Bell curves are nice. If you like maths, and you like bell curves, bell curves are great. And if you know anything about me, why do I like Wrath and Glory? It's a dice pool system, bell curves. Why do I like the new Old World system, which, having written for that, because as was announced elsewhere, it's a dice pool system. It's rolling buckets of d10s for your character. And for me personally, and my partner, my wife, happily plays RPGs. She likes Vampire the Masquerade. Why? You tell her, it's a bit more difficult. Remove a die. She's like, it's obvious. Whereas I think sometimes with D&D and some other things, it can get a bit more like, what's the difference between rolling 2d6 versus a 2d4 or 3?
Yeah.
You need to know it a bit more. I think dice pools are really easy to eyeball. So, that is a very brief view of what Warmachine's mechanics are like, but why I've coming back to it feels like a very nice little blanket of it hasn't really changed since the first edition, which is crazy. But when you compare how much like 40k's changed recently,
it's vastly different.
Change is a very, very touchy thing, isn't it? I think within wargaming and role playing games, because I think it's. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. We want new things that are cool and exciting, but we don't want anything to change.
Yeah,
and it's a real. it's a real terrible balancing act, isn't it? You know,
and changes because people. I've seen this in RPGs where, like with Vampire the Masquerade, there's a whole. There's such a timeline of changes. Like you had Vampire the Masquerade, they killed off that world and then created Chronicles of Darkness, which had Vampire the Requiem. Same flavors, different remix, new world. People hated that because suddenly all that built-in, I know Vampire the Masquerade so well, and now I don't have that, be able to lord it over that I know the setting inside out, is gone. And you get that with war games, because that you felt like you've put in all that work to know it inside out, and now you've been told, nah, it means nothing, mate. You're going to have to relearn it.
Yeah.
But some people do that and they hate it. Other people like me, like, oh, I've got something new to learn.
Yeah, enjoy the challenge of it, yeah. Yeah, it's a funny one, I think, when you look at it, is that we sometimes you only have to change the slightest thing and everyone's up in arms, and then
they'll be up in arms about different versions of Warhammer. Like the announcement of Old World means people go, oh, is that replacing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay? You're like, no, but it's a different system, because people do find different systems easier to learn. And it's also the same with like 40k. You know, this is as I say, D6 dice pool system, but you've got Imperium Maledictum, which is percentile like Warhammer Fantasy, but they serve different purposes, because again, I'm kind of a system matters type of person. So am I going to play 40k with the D&D rule set? No, because D&D rule set is designed for a particular type of experience, I feel. Whereas this is like, do you want to play action horror RPG where you can play a Space Marine with a really hard-ass Imperial Guardsman and a Sister of Battle and someone?
Yeah.
Or do you want to play Imperium Maledictum where you're like, you're all members of Inquisitional cadre. Are you going to survive? Well, maybe not, because you're disposable and it's rather Call of Cthulhu-like, and you know the madness of chaos is going to cause your brain to leak out.
Love that.
So, yeah, I'm very much system matters, and like Iron Kingdoms is a D&D system, but that's because it started off as a D20 RPG. So that was like, that would be 3rd edition D&D essentially, and then it went through a 4th edition, which used the same system as the war game, and now it's back to being a D&D system, because it's kind of back to its roots, but also everyone and their nan has the D&D rule set somewhere.
I've got to be honest, when you say D20, and I'm a guy who very, very much doesn't sit there and go, oh, do you know, 40k would be better if they tweaked. I have like 2 or 3 things where I go, I wish they'd do this with 40k. And generally, whenever I say to people who go, you just want to make the game more complicated, and I go, yeah, which is quite funny for somebody who barely clings onto rules at the best of the time. But I've got to be honest, I would D20 40k.
Really?
Because I just don't think there is enough variant in numbers between skills and so on. Yeah,
it's an interesting thing, because I mean, there's discussions like when you're rolling buckets of D6s, it kind of gives you that, you look at it and go, well, I know about on average 4 will hit, and then I've got to roll to wound, maybe 2 will wound. That's how you make your decisions. Whereas I feel by comparison with Iron Kingdoms, you kind of every roll is a 2d6 roll.
Yeah.
Add or minus +2, -2 based upon a stat line or a buff, a spell in play, and then you go, do I spend this focus point on my warcaster to make that shot hit? And then you're like going, with like Kane's got an ability where you go, and if it hits with this shot type, my next spell hits automatically. And so you're chaining these things up. And that's why, I don't know how much you know about the turn sequences of this. You know how everything's like generally 40k, move everything, shoot everything, combat everything.
Yeah.
This is where you activate a unit, you go, it moves, it does all its combat actions, move on to the next thing, it moves, does all its... So you also have kind of a... Even though your opponent is waiting for you to finish your turn, you've got to reassess when something messes up, or something may go. You might go like, I did not expect me to blow apart that warjack in one go, but I have, and it's now giving me this whole new opportunity.
About
it keeps
your move,
evolving. And there are abilities in the game which allow your opponent to respond. So like there might be like, oh, if your opponent misses shooting you, you get to actually have a shot back at them, or you might be able to. You get hit, like Kane's got something where he gets hit and you can move him into cover, so he gets to move 3 inches. So you've got some responsive actions where you can go like, I'll take a risk. I'll leave Kane out in the middle there because he's bloody hard to hit anyway, because he's basically Neo. Let's be honest, he's Neo. But if you do hit him, he's going to pop back into cover. So you're kind of hedging your bets a bit more.
Which has got to be honest is one of the mechanics that I really enjoy about Kill Team. I'm starting to get into Kill Team a lot more, and I really enjoy the idea, the fact that obviously what goes on from your opponent's one guy has a bearing on what you then get to do with when it comes back to you. It's not like a preordained, well, I have to do this. You can, you know, and then because you're playing with such a small number of miniatures, it allows for quirk as well. Like, you know, for example, the Ratlings being able to move and, you know, shoot, and then immediately do a little dash back into cover because they're extraordinarily fleshy.
I've not played the new... I've played Kill Team before they got rid of shapes.
Yes.
And I quite enjoyed it because the Adeptus Arbites were really fun. What else can I say about Warmachine? So obviously they've got the plastic set. They've just opened my...
Absolutely right.
So I don't think you got to see these when they were out. And they've just announced the new starter set, which has got Warlocks and Warbeasts in. So it's got the Trollkin, Southern Creole, and Chimera, Shadow Flame, something.
Was this the one that went up on pre-order recently?
This went up on pre-order, I think, on Friday.
Was it the guys like the pirate redcoats?
Yeah. Trollkin are really hilarious. And then, so, you know, you've got various flavours of them. Like, you've had some in the past which are like being fire-breathing. They would just drink alcohol and breathe fire. Or be on like... They'd be on like giant bison and just charge people down, which is a fun character type that I had to write for Iron Kingdoms RPG. It was like, how do I get this miniature into the roleplay game and make it feel fun? And that is...
I mean, that's a whole conversation in itself. Was it... when Space Marine 2 came out, I think like we'd said like, well, all the bolters feel very similar.
Yeah.
And then...
There's little nuances.
And then... you'd said, oh, like, imagine what it was like writing for the Wrath and Glory book.
Yeah, that it's a challenge, and sometimes that's where you butt up against the inherent limitations with a system where you're like, well, we could add an extra D6 to it, but it's like, well, that kind of makes it like that gun. It's like, it's tricky, and sometimes you just kind of have to accept that you hit the edge of where you can explore a system. And it might just have to be a bit of flavour text that goes with it. Yeah. Because ultimately a shotgun's a shotgun, maybe.
When it comes to Space Marines with Wrath and Glory, I find the idea quite interesting that you have... They are probably the most written about piece of 40k history, lore and history is Space Marines. And so they are very, in a lot of areas, you're very boxed in. How much leeway does using a new, or well, like I say, new, but a chapter that isn't really...
So with the Absolvers, I think we had some scope to try and make them different. Like, we didn't want them to be just a Codex chapter in some respects. They do follow the Codex Astartes, but they're actually Blood Angels.
Yeah.
We also do, I think in the book we do say, well, if you want, you can have them as a different origin, because, you know, they're a whichever founding chapter.
Yeah.
But we did get some leeway, because obviously with Wrath and Glory, we've got kind of like a little sandbox of the galaxy.
Yes.
The Gilead system. So the Gilead system is literally stuck in the Great Rift. It's this bit of normal space that there was a corridor through. The Veronius Rogue Trader fleet was like, oh, we can get through. Now we're bloody stuck. And because everyone's stuck there, all these different groups are stuck together. It's just, and it's a bit of real space in that madness. People just go, oh, we just come out of, oh, we're stuck here. We can't actually get out. So you've got a group of, there's some Chaos Space Marines that are clearly in the asteroid belt and with the pirates do their own thing. There are the local Corsairs who are there because there's a webway gate nearby. They're having some fun. There's a planet which the Ulkari craft world crashed into due to the Great Rift. So there's also craft world Eldar that are kind of like going, damn, our home's destroyed on an ice world. We're going to have to make some friends. Who's nearby? Oh, there's this fleet of rogue traders. We'll make some friends with them because otherwise we are screwed. So it's one of those things I think you get sometimes in 40k novels where you get these weird alliances of convenience.
Yeah.
And that's why when this came out, people were like, oh, isn't it just plain 40k Super Friends? It's like, you do realise that in the 40k novels, Space Marines team up with some of the weirdest people at times. Yeah. And like, Eisenhorn's just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to team up with, I'll make friends with those. Ravenor is quite happy to run around with some craft world Eldar every so often. So those things happen and you can orchestrate it. And I do joke that in writing the stuff for the Eldari players book, so you can play Corsairs, you can play Drukhari, which is a whole experience. Like, do you want to play a vampire game in space where everyone's just like, yes, please flay me? Have you played the Road Trader computer game?
No.
Oh, play that. You get a real Drukhari experience.
I've heard very good things.
You can no, do I say that you can romance that person? You can, and it's interesting.
Thankfully.
Okay.
But I did joke, like, I do kind of, I think it got cut, but I do still suggest, like, in the Okari scenario, the Shards of Okari scenario that's coming out that I wrote, which is basically you play a full team of Eldari for going to their crashed craft world. I do put in there, like, oh, you don't have to all be all Eldar. You could have a human with you because you might be their pet.
Yeah.
Who's quite useful in certain situations where we're like, right, we're going to this pirate asteroid base. He's going to talk to the people, the locals there. Send the human.
Very good.
We can't deal with this stuff, and we hate the smell because you have to think Eldari senses are so heightened. They're just like, we're not going there. Why? It stinks. It stinks. So I do joke you could have also like an orc freebooter trucking around with some Corsairs.
Oh, amazing!
Wearing a big fluffy, big hat, got some trinkets. So wielding a. There's no reason an orc wouldn't go like, I really like this shuriken catapult. Why not?
Yeah.
So you can get 40k is not serious business all the time.
No,
it really is not.
I know, like from reading the Kane novels, like they are sort of introduced with the Tau quite a lot, and sometimes they're fighting them, sometimes they have alliances, and it's all just, it is of convenience.
There's playable crew in one of the books as well, so you can play a crew. I haven't introduced Tau yet. And like Imperial Malediction's quite fun. So when I've run, we ran a one shot for the podcast for Dark Days Radio to show how the game operates, rather than just doing doing the kind of like the critical role style play. We actually play, but also point out that rule, why that enhances the gameplay experience. One of the things I did was like the party lands. The first thing I had was like, right, you got all this paperwork to sign before you can get past the Imperial officials. I was like, I'm giving you full-blown red tape horror, because that is part of 40k. Is that Brazil type feel.
Yeah.
And one of the players, Mike, who's been my long-term co-host for Dark Days, like actually, because he's playing like the cadres like scribe, he's got an auto quill and goes, this is my battle. Just like starts signing quadruplet forms. So you can get into that kind of madness. And again, it's like, and it represents the difference between the two 40k RPGs. Like Imperial Maledictum allows you to get into that, the imperial bureaucracy and how that's its own horror story of stuff. And maybe like the Ordo, is it Ordo Kronos? Is it? I think it is, something like that. So there's a whole Ordo that deals with the fact there's time discrepancies between things.
Yes.
Because you imagine if you've got time discrepancies in reports, you could hide things really well. So 40k RPG is really fun for that. And like I said, the two things, like another thing. So Valve Absolution, I said, is basically kind of like a codex for the absolvers. They do some things that means they're not quite blood angels, so that's why they team up with humans. It's their way of like conditioning themselves early on so they don't go full red thirst, which I think is really kind of cool. So they're kind of a bit like, do Black Templars do kind of like a vows and
they have vows,
It's kind of a bit like that, but with a blood angels flavour, so you don't just slake your thirst on everyone around you. And so there's also going to be a scenario out for that where you play a full kill team of absolvers.
Cool.
And
absolutely sensational.
I'd love to see I'd love there to be an in-depth 40k, for people who really love punishing themselves. But like, so 40k, but then like imagine like because obviously it's Marines don't carry vast amounts of ammunition and they rely on servitors. And imagine like having a servitor or a servitor role that was, as you're about to, you make your shots, your servitor has been nailed on the way back to the front line with more ammunition. Turn, you haven't got,
like
you end up with resource issues of,
like was it in the third Matrix where they're having the mech fight against all the, and then the guys with wheelbarrows with the ammunition, and it's like, nope, it got stuck, you're dead.
Yeah,
well, that's quite funny you say that, because like there's a series of scenarios for Wrath and Glory where you play through the same. You basically, it all takes place at the same event that's going on, this invasion of a hive, but each scenario you play with a different group of characters that had different power levels. So the one you're just Imperial Guardsmen.
Yes.
There's another way you're playing like Tempestus Scion, so you're doing a full like aerial assault to get in there. And then the next one is like there's one where you're actually playing Eldari who've snuck in. So they've got their own mission, they're utilising the chaos of the ensuing battle to do their mission. And then there's another way you're playing top tier Space Marines. And so that's why the game's got built-in different tiers.
Because from my limited reading of it and sort of, my camera's died, never mind. There might be just some cut to blacks of me because that's overheated. I'll just be a voice from now on. It talks about your power levels.
Yeah.
Can you mix it up and have some Space Marines with some humans?
Yes, so the game supports that. If you're going to play a Space Marine, which is generally, let's say, a tactical Space Marine is going to be like tier 3 character. So if you play like an Imperial Guardsman, that's generally going to start off is what we call a tier 1
tier
character.
1, yeah.
You will get a whole bucket load of XP to bring them up to that tier to make it fair.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, fair's always a difficult thing because, like, Space Marines in this are not going to die as easily as a Space Marine's going to die in a game of 40k.
Yeah,
no,
right.
Because you've got to make the game fun.
Yeah.
And so it's that whole thing, like, back in, like, I guess it would have been about 2004, White Dwarf had cinematic Space Marines where your army was literally just like 5 Marines.
Yeah.
You could play that. So that's kind of like the feel of it. And then related to the tier system is that if you're tier 1, an Orc boy is a threat.
Yes.
Like, you're going to brick yourself, you're going to fire your little flashlight and hope you kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tier 3, as a Space Marine, the system then is more like that. Used to have multiple wounds, now you just count it as having 1 wound because your Marine is just going to go like full auto and take out 10 orcs.
Right,
happily.
okay, yeah.
So the game builds in the idea that depending on what you're playing, you're going to adjust it to get the right cinematic experience of the action they should and threat they should be up against.
Yeah.
Because come on, do you really want to roll and go through every single wound on those Orc boys?
No. When
Marines in the novels blow people apart happily.
Yes.
Well, there's talk in certain novels in I think is it in Spears the Emperor where they talk about the Imperial Guard talk about when they're discussing tactics with these Space Marines, they're talking about how long it's going to take to regain a city.
Yeah.
And it's months and months and months. And they go, if we send like a company of Marines down, which is obviously about 100, we think we can probably get that down to about a month or down to a few days.
A few days,
You know, and you think, well, 40k doesn't represent guys who can shave months off a war.
It's
And I get it.
Because Vow of Absolution, we introduced tier 5, which is where you can start playing Marines and like Terminator armor.
Sensational.
And really high-powered Primaris, which is just like mad. So the stuff I wrote for that was like, well, what is that going to be like, that play experience? Because there's the whole thing of like, they have to interact. If you're that important a Marine, you're going to interact with very important humans, because you're a transhuman. Humans, so you've got that fish out of water element where you're like at some ball, some dinner, and you're just a Marine there, like you're watching humans engaging in the most petty squabbles going. You've got that to deal with.
I do absolutely love the sort of Marines are just like, what on earth are these humans doing? And then the humans are like, what on earth are these Marines doing?
Yeah.
Like they're
I love. They are almost like completely different.
And then they're
races,
also going to have. You can also then play a more troop play experience, so where you have an entourage of lower level characters who are humans and tech priests that serve the Marines. So you can play your games going like, well, first we're going to do that with those ones and maybe a scout. And then you go, right, then we'll see what happens with this kill team who will work for these high-powered characters. And then you go to the high-powered characters that you all play as, and you might be dealing with both the repercussions of that, the fact that you've been called to go take out some, I don't know, bloodthirster maybe, you're the type of characters that could do that, and also the internal petty squabbles that occur within an Imperial chapter, because there will be secrets, and there are secrets that have to be dealt with, and some people have not been indoctrinated to them and have aspirations for, commanding the chapter, and may also want to do that because they have vengeance on their minds, and they want to take a company off to obliterate some Chaos Marines somewhere.
It's what I like. It's one of the things I like that Abnet very much deals with it when it, not just within Eisenhorn, but within, as I'm currently reading within Tracer General as well, is I like that whole thing with regards to Chaos Marines, that they get sent off on things on their own.
Yeah.
And they go there and get all them cultists together and get them to go and do this, or go over there and just control that sector for a while and just send a single Chaos Marine off to do that. I think it's great, you know.
Yeah.
And I know there is a real reflection of that, because the main character, to go back to the book again, but Spears the Emperor, the guy, the Marine in that whole chapter, his job is to meet to be emissaries and to train Imperial Guardsmen up and do all of these different jobs. And I do like that when Marines get sent off on their own. I think it makes them more interesting, because
massively,
Marines become far more interesting the minute you surround them with people who aren't Marines, I think.
Yes.
And then like in Iron Kingdoms, I'll say it's like kind of like gives you that experience as well of like, you can, because it's D&D, you can play characters at different levels. You can play a warcaster and have a warjack under control. And
awesome, because
of the way that game is developed, you've got adventuring companies. So you can be part of a mercenary company or a pirates. So like all the miniatures in this, there's something you can play as in the game.
They're really nice as well.
They're really good plastics.
Yeah, they really are.
I'm not. I've only written the RPG, so I've got nothing to do with the plastics. And I like these plastics a lot.
I like the fact that they are all near each other.
Yes.
Not the Orc Commando sprue.
Oh yes, yeah.
Everything. B's and A's, and so you know where you're at straight away.
So like, so Nightmare Empire is everything about the Crix faction. So it's essentially character types you can play undead. So there is playable undead in this book. You can play a ghost. You can play a zombie that actually has control of its mind. You can play a necrotech who like starts going like, oh, you've lost your arm. Because you've got a fellow character in the group who's also undead and lost her arm. We can fix that. Here's a bit of a warjack. Made you a new arm.
Sensational.
So there's that kind of fun, and also rules for playing Pirates of the Shard Isles. The Requiem Call book, I didn't work on that, but that's basically everything that you get that, and it bolts onto onto D&D, and has the rules for warcasters. You can play as gun mages who fire their shots. A rune shot, you fire it, has a spell attached to it.
Oh wow, that's clever.
They're badasses. The other technology like warcasters, they have they have power suits essentially. So they've got like these steam powered arcane generators on their backpacks that creates an energy field for them, but also channels arcane energy into the weapons and armor that they have. So that's how they enhance themselves and so forth. Nightmare Empire is that one. Borderlands Beyond is the character book for everything. You know how I said about these warlocks and war beasts?
Yes.
That's basically that. So you can start playing, I can't remember the stuff in here. There's so much. Bogrin, which is a type of goblin. Pharaoh are pig people.
Sensational.
They're mad, and you know how orcs do really weird technology? Pharaoh are like that and are very mutagenic. Like they get, there's a character called, there's an alchemist character who you can play in the game, in the war game, but he like happily like goes, we need some new fighters. We shall inject you with mutagenic alchemicals and you'll grow bigger, stronger. And that's why they have giant pig people war beasts with buzzsaws for arms and so forth. And I think there's something about, if you've watched Willow, pig people, something about that just feels off. And then you can play like variants of alchemists. So you've got alchemists, but then you've got the wilderness version called bone grinders. They use like, they get stuff off animals, organs, grind up to make poultices and magic stuff. Again, more subclasses for things. And then that one I worked on, which is for Deep Wild, which I think the book that went with that character book introduces playing gator men, which are, so that there are gator people and like frog people and so forth. So in that one, I wrote a full scenario. So you go from the city of Lale. Lale I kind of consider like France, Italy, kind of Renaissance era, just after Cador have left because they invaded for a while. So it starts off as a murder mystery, and then you're off into the wilderness and things get weird. So there's an element of like eco horror in there as well. Right. So I've touched pretty much every part of the Iron Kingdoms other than Scorn, who I love. And then also the other important thing, that big warjack there, that's printed. That's one of their recent resin prints that
I was looking at that up close earlier, and
I can't even see any layer, barely see layer lines.
Really impressed with the quality.
That was about 5 pieces. It's legs, body, and it's both its arms.
And the sculpt is fantastic as well.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Seeing them all on the table and everything, I'm really impressed.
Because I guess Matt didn't show you last time, so these in the game, you can swap the heads and the arms. So the heads and the arms, or on the war beast, you get kind of the equivalent thing.
Because they're all built to be magnetised, is that right?
Change the, in game terms, changes like how it will work.
Do you know what I like about this is that if I just look at the model for a moment, is the fact that it's got plenty going on, but I'm looking at it and I'm also thinking nowhere on it do I think I'd struggle to get my brush in there. It's laid out very well.
You can do a lot of texture. You can give the sense of texture and wear and tear on it without going like, oh, I've just hit a whole load more chainmail or skulls.
It's a really nicely laid out miniature. I really like it. And like you say, you've got plenty of space to do things with it as well. It's nice, really nice.
Like what I really enjoy about painting Terminators or Space Marines to a certain extent, you've got that space to go, oh, I'll put this blend in, rather than going, oh, I haven't put a blend in because I need to paint that book that's strapped to the shoulder.
It's such I like painting things, and then it's like larger things like, so these are just so you got some, those are from like Kingdom Death. That's one of the models from Kingdom Death. So I've done, because I used to do. I did with Beasts of War back in the Let's Play videos, so I'm very much into Kingdom Death, and I've still got loads to still paint. There's so much. So that's like a big monster for it, whereas that one is a 52mm pin-up model, which I might enter into Chilcon's painting competition, because that one's not been entered into anything yet. It's lovely. My other love of life, and it's a lifestyle choice, that's for certain. It's that many miniatures.
Oh, I think
that's lovely.
I saw the Kingdom Death booth at Gen Con last year.
Adam Booth is like,
it's phenomenal, all of the stuff that they have. Like,
some of it's utter nightmare fuel.
Oh yeah, yes. Oh yeah.
Some of the miniatures huge. Like White Dragon they're bringing out is like, that's gonna be in plastics, crazy.
Oh wow.
And I've got there's more of the Kador Warjacks as well there. I think they've got plans that some of these factions that traditionally were like Warjack and Warcaster only, they're introducing Warlocks into the faction. So that changes the play style. I just highly recommend playing it. And I don't know if people are aware, how all the rules are free on the app. The app exists you can get on desktop as well.
Sensational.
So you can print out your army list. So if you're the type of person who goes like, okay, I don't like using phones and stuff at the game, you can still print it out and have all the rules for your units, all the health boxes, and all of that. So that's what I've done for demos, which I'll be doing at Chilcon as well.
Yeah.
So there's
absolutely
a lot
amazing.
going on.
So much going on.
The other thing to say that are coming up, Strange Light Workshop is coming out for Iron Kingdoms sometime soon. That's basically a new core book for Iron Kingdoms that makes the game angled for ghost hunting and spectre hunting and that type of thing. Wrath and Glory, trying to think, like I say, Valve Absolution's coming out at some point. There's some other stuff in the works. As I've worked on Old World, can't say much more about that because it's so early on. And then the other things coming up is...
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Trash Humanism. So this is a graphic novel by the musician La Destroy. So she did some music for Cyberpunk 2077.
Right.
So off the back of this graphic novel, that's basically the primer for the world that we're making an RPG for. So that's in conjunction with, would be announced today as we're recording, with Gehenna Gaming are going to be publishing. So Gehenna Gaming put out the RPG Eldritch Automata, which is like a Neon Genesis Evangelion meets kind of Cthulhu elements RPG.
Yeah.
That I also worked on. So we're doing it's kind of cyberpunk, but it's really more biopunk RPG.
Oh, okay.
So there's a more focus on the ownership of your genetics, the autonomy of the human body, as megacorps are trying to like literally sell everything, which is kind of a bit Blade Runner-esque in that sense, because when they talk about the skin jobs and that, they're not actually robots. They're artificially made organics. So that's the plan with that. And then there's mostly something else I've totally forgotten at some point that's coming up, but mostly I'm under an NDA, so rather I not say anything at this point. And then also I've got, because that came out as a hard copy recently, I thought I lost mine, and so I had to buy a new one because I want to show it. That's the that one gold at the Ennies at Gen Con this previous year. So that's the antagonist book for Wrath and Glory. I think I did like the
threat assessment Xenos.
I did like all the Corsairs, and I worked mainly on the Gene Stealer cult chapter. So there's a whole chapter of antagonist Gene Stealer cults all the way up to a patriarch.
So judging by the cover, is it anything that a Space Marine can shoot at?
It's everything a Space Marine can shoot at and more. It's even got, I think, Tau and Kroot in
some
there.
Some great
as well.
art in here.
There's really some art is obviously. Games Workshop has wonderful
a lot of stuff I've never seen before.
But there are lots of new stuff.
Which is not something I can often say with a codex.
Yes.
Where I can look at a codex and they go, that from 12 years ago.
So I thought I'd lost my copy, and then I ordered that so I could bring it, and then I was like, I found my copy. So that one you can give away to someone.
Fantastic.
As a prize.
Oh,
Thank you
that's
very
wonderful.
Much.
Very kind of you. Very kind of you indeed.
Yeah, amazing. I just can't believe how much you've been involved with. And how much you do.
It ramps up, and it's just getting a bit crazy at times. And it's, when you have a day job, I think the nice thing has been, I'm aware that it would have to, something bloody spectacular would have to happen for me to go, I'm not working in software engineering anymore because I'm just going to do gaming. But also at the same time, having the security of that and being able to be a freelancer and go, I don't have to work like to the bone on gaming, just because sometimes that can kill your passion for it.
I was about to say, it really,
It's nice to pick and choose projects, someone to come along and go, oh, do you want to work on this? Go, actually, I'm a bit busy, I'm going to work on this instead right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I put the word out on the Discord that you're coming. And,
I've got questions.
Yeah. Well, Sundancer has asked a few questions. Is basis square or round?
Square or round? I'm going to say round. If they did a new version of Mordheim, I'd put it on round because it just makes measuring easier.
Yeah, very good.
And also, I like the Warmachine lipped bases. When they first came out, I was like, they look kind of hot on those bases, don't they?
It's interesting looking at those bases because
I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the Warmachine base. The fact that it's got a slight recess to it.
Because then they got picked up by Malifaux, didn't they? Malifaux used that base type, and then obviously Guild Ball, which obviously is by Steamforge, use that base type. I just kind of like it. Yeah,
I do have a soft spot for it.
So there's noob question. It goes lipped and then goes down.
Yeah,
and
very slightly. Yeah, just so it makes it just a bit easier for.
Very good. Mini material, resin, plastic, or metal?
Oh God! Well, that's really hard right now because obviously, like I say, the Invictus is really good resin.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go with plastic because I've been there since day one with lead miniatures. I still have plenty of confrontation models that are lead, which are easy to clean up. Some have spears. White metal when it came in was a pain.
Do you remember? Did you just talking about confrontation? And this is going to be so many people go, what is he talking about? But do you ever remember they were female duelists for the Griffin?
Yes.
They all had little half cloaks on, and they all had hair in buns.
They
literally what you had to do when you put them together is you would go to your local hospital. And you'd find, a surgeon who deal with brains things, and just go, "There's the glue. Can you put them hands? Can you put them?" In the end, they were meant to be like this, and in the end, you just go, "I'm gluing them to their thighs," because there is just the connection points were just like
minuscule.
Yeah, and you go with plastic, you would have a lot more play to be able to.
And I've got some which at the ankles, just snapped.
Yeah,
just over time.
I loved the petiteness of miniatures for confrontation, but also you just go, this could go horribly wrong.
It'll be good to see what happens with it in future because obviously the IP's being picked up by I want to say Monolith. Mostly wrong. It's Monolith or the other one.
I spoke to sorry I don't remember his name in case he's watching. I spoke to a really lovely French guy at at Spiel at Essen, and he was massively involved in it coming back. And I think it's 2026. I think we'll see the beginnings of Confrontation return.
Oh, wow.
Which is great.
It would be low-hanging fruit if they brought back out Hybrid, because that box game, so it's a dungeon crawler game, but it's 1v1, so you've got templates.
It's very Space Hulk, isn't it?
Like, for when that came out, which was the same year as Warmachine, makes even modern Kickstarters pale in comparison. The amount of flavor text on cards and the art design is unreal.
Wow.
Such a good game.
Yeah.
If you get the retranslation of the rules, that is.
Yeah.
It's a bit.
The really lovely thing about Confrontation with hybrids was that it brought out a magazine 4 times a year called Cry Havoc.
I've got a few copies of that.
It's such a beautiful thing. You know, it was about £12 an issue, but 4 times a year.
Yeah.
But because you don't have any codex, all the miniatures just have a card with their stat on. So what they would do is they would do variants of sometimes new characters and sometimes variants of them. And they go, here's what happened if they went into them dungeons.
Okay.
So you gave other characters a bit more life inside another game.
Some of the pages in the Cry Havoc as well, they're a higher grade stock for as art prints.
Yeah.
Not seen a magazine like it.
You could easily with Cry Havoc, you could get a scalpel to the edge of a page and frame it.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a really, I really lament its departure, but it was great that it was always allowing you chance to do something a little bit different with miniatures you already had, which was quite cool.
Again, you could play it small. I've also got. I never played it, but the rules again. It's one of those things where you go, "This was definitely written by someone in French and then translated to English because wow, Ragnarok."
Yeah, Ragnarok
was the massed battle version
of Confrontation,
and it came with the rule book, but there's also a setting book which also had like the alphabets for each of the factions and stuff.
Yeah, really.
Wow.
Yeah, it worked on so many levels because then they had Cadwallon.
Yeah, the RPG.
Cadwallon was an RPG where it was called the City of Thieves.
Yeah.
And there was all different guilds. It was like the guilds of the assassin, the guilds of this, the guilds of that. So there was all these different little guilds. And then you had the militia who were trying to keep everybody in, which was brilliant. They had really amazing things. Like they had a dwarf who was a crossbowman, but had the most amazingly large glasses because his eyesight was so awful. And he just like pupils off in different directions. And they had like a guy who was like the cook, but was still like had a sword and a shield, but with like a pig strapped on his back and cooked in sausages, and it was very, very flavoursome. But the idea with that was that you could pick these guys and play them in an RPG.
Yeah.
But then you could actually also play Cadwallon as a faction, be it at skirmish level or as like mass battle level.
It's really, one of those things which
everything populated everything else.
Especially with Cities of Sigmar, you can definitely see where some of the DNA of Confrontation exists in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, definitely.
Because clearly they picked up I think it's 9. There's definitely some sculptors that used to work for Rackham that work for Games Workshop these days.
Oh wow!
You can see that. I mean, you only have to look at that ogre in Cities of Sigmar. You put it next to the ogre that is literally doing who also has a person in a
crow's nest on his back.
It's the same. It's the same flavour, obviously, with the Warhammer look to it, but it's definitely there. And yeah, to have Confrontation come back because Wolfen are like kick ass, and I've got some Wolfen miniatures.
Yeah, the Wolfen are great. But it's funny you say that. You know, I was really, really instantly drawn to Cities of Sigmar as somebody who doesn't play Ages of Sigmar. And I never knew why I was so instantly. And now I now know why, is because you're right, it really does remind me of Competition.
I also think the same with the undead stuff recently. They look more like there's elements of the Legions of something of Archeron.
Yeah.
Abyss of Archeron, something like that.
Yeah.
And that as an undead faction looks nothing like what was out at the time. Yeah. And again, it's one of those things where you look at I guess we're lamenting that Confrontation was like badass at the time.
Yeah.
We've got other games to talk about, but it's one of those things where you see they did their artwork, their designs, they then made the miniatures based on the design. They would then paint the miniature. I think the cycles they would paint the miniature, and then the paint scheme used on the miniature would go back onto the art design. So you've got this synchronicity.
Yeah. You ended up with miniatures. You ended up with that. I've said this before. If you bought an issue of Cry Havoc and there was a piece of art of a miniature that hadn't come out yet,
It would look.
It would look like that when it arrived, as opposed to going. I remember seeing the early ideas of what the Black Templars were going to look like when they came out in third edition, and then didn't look at it. They went, "Here you go. Here's a chain on a gun," and you go, and that was it.
Yeah.
And now, by the time we got to Primaris, they look like what we were promised in third edition, or maybe fourth edition.
Yes.
But Cry Havoc, when they went, "We're going to. This guy will be out in 2 months' time," and you go, "Yeah, and he'll probably look just like that," and they would.
Oh, fantastic!
Which it was a really, really sad state of affairs.
I would definitely say, in all fairness to Privative Press, I think they Privative Press at the time and now Iron Kingdoms, I think the same is true with them.
Yeah,
because,
I agree with that.
Because the creator of Iron Kingdoms, Matt Wilson, is a graphic artist who did a lot of work for, I think, Magic the Gathering back in the day, and so that's why you look at. Let's go all the way back. You look at even the classic Warjacks in this. Let's take the Crix one for example, because it's almost 1-for-1. There we go. No, that's not it. Is that it? No, this way. So this one here, the Helljack Reaper, you'd have to do a close-up, but that is the first edition version of it. Now they're multi-part, you can mix and match weapons, but it still looks the same.
Yeah.
And the metal miniature look like that. And I think it just shows that, again, that synchronicity between the vision and who's doing the art and what they want as a design. Whereas I think, mostly just because of the scale of Games Workshop and how their process works to get something designed, go to art, go to game design, is very different. I think sometimes there's a mismatch at points. And also just because of how they want to portray things. Because as we've seen, 40k, for example, looks very, very different depending on what you play. I mean, you've played Blood, Teeth and Bolters. Those orcs look really different.
Yeah.
Another question.
Yeah.
Sorry, we went on a massive tangent.
That's what we do. Don't worry about
it. Yeah. And it's from my perspective, it's really nice to hear such positive chat about like other games.
And I'm just sort of like, ooh. I'm going to quickly say as well, Confrontation is a very interesting dice system to play. And if I've yet to play it, but I've obviously owned miniatures for it, I've painted them, and I've got the rule book for it. Batman Miniatures 3rd edition, I think it's quite similar in dice system.
Okay. Do you know that even the other Kill Team, I'm playing it the other night and I had a real blip for a moment where it felt like, because in Confrontation you would gain a number of dice for combat, and then you would make a gamble.
Match them up,
and then you gamble against. You're going, well,
do I want to put that as a defense style or an attack?
Put that attack or
Kill
a defense?
Team, same, yeah.
And Kill Team does the same, whereas Kill Team you both roll them together and then decide what you're going to do. You would make the gamble in advance. You go, I think I can crush that, so I'm going to put everything into attack, and it'll probably be dead before it gets chance to fight back.
Okay.
Or if it does fight back, it's going to bounce.
That's why I would compare Warcry to Warmachine to a slight extent, because again, you've got a dice pool. Not quite. You're not summing up the numbers to give you a final value. You're summing up successes. But again, there are those times where you go, am I going to sacrifice? Am I going to use one of my triples or quadruples or whatever, or doubles to boost what I'm doing or get some other effect? So again, you're kind of hedging your bets with it. So that is fun. And like I say, with do I block or do I go for the attack on this? Because you just don't know, but you kind of do know. You go like, oh, but if I pull it off, you might spike some. Might get spiking damage, and that's again similar between Warmachine and Warcry.
Yeah.
Sometimes just like, oh my god, I've just rolled tons of sixes on that, and it feels momentous. Whereas again, go back to 40k, you roll a lot of sixes, you go, that's great. Well, I've got to roll to win now. Like, it's that momentous minute that just disappears in the watch.
I love that in the little mechanic in Kill Team that I really like is that a 6 allows you to gain into a second level of being able to hit better, and then it can trigger other things as well. And if you roll all your dice as the attacker, but only you everything fails, but you get a 6. And then your opponent rolls his 3 dice, and 2 of them are successful. 2 of them can cancel that 6. And I love that thing of going, there is a constant, you can go into a fight in Kill Team and really think I've really got this nailed, and then have a really bad dice roll, and then get chewed to pieces for it. It doesn't have the level of certainties for it are a little bit different to that of 40k. I think it's quite interesting.
And similar, another thing to point out with like how warjacks work in the game. You know how like tanks and beasties in 40k or Age of Sigmar, you wound them. Generally across the board, their stats go down.
Yeah.
And you feel like, okay, they're not doing as well, but they're still a bit of a threat. Warmachine's quite funny. Like you can blast it with a ton of damage, but because the way the hitboxes work on them, you have to go all the way through these empty boxes before you start taking out systems. So you may have done like 20 points of damage on a warjack. It could, so long as it's got one hitbox for its left system, one for its right system, one for its cortex, one for its movement, it's still working at full capacity. So you're basically tearing off its armor, and it could still come up to you and go, as is one of the rules of the game, do a one-handed throw where it goes, if I roll to hit you, that model I throw over there. So there's a lot of movement shenanigans that involve body slams, movement, headbutts.
Sensational.
That's why it's a bit of a brawl game, which is really good. So where warjacks grind against each other, and it really does feel like that.
Yeah,
cool.
I didn't realize how much I'd enjoy learning about different dice systems and way that cool robots can beat the crap out of each other.
Yeah, and there's so many. I used to play. You may well know it. Did you ever play Stargrunt?
No.
Stargrunt had this great system where you drew numbers out of a hat, and it told you like you might have like a really veteran squad, but with a new captain. Or you could have a really poor squad, but with a veteran captain, and it did all these things and so your squads you didn't know what your squads were like beforehand, and then depending on how good or bad they were, was dependent on how many sides of the dice they had.
Oh right, okay.
So so if you were really good, obviously if you're like a really cool veteran unit, your dice had less sides. And because it was just easier to then nail the number you needed, and it was just very clever. But they had like a little mechanic in it that if one of your guys got wounded in your squad, your morale would drop.
Yeah, okay.
Even though he was still on the board, he would be wounded, and then but what it had in the game, it had a number of turns, and then he would be medevaced. And when they knew he'd gone to safety, the morale went back up again because they were like, "Oh, well, he's gone, and he'll be okay." Cool. You might be able to save the leg.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was, and I love little things like that.
And was it a smaller sort of skirmish sort of
game?
No.
It was a big mass battle. And you know what? We had a whole game because a lot of it was just getting your opponent to get his head down. And me and a chap you may know, a friend of mine, he's moved up north now, a guy called Jake Thornton. He's been a big game designer in his day. And me and him played in a battle, and it went back and forth. And at the end of it, we looked and realised no one was dead.
That's no one had died. Necromunda could be just. I've been running a campaign for that, and you're just shooting at each other. Everyone's just diving for cover, and the game just literally, like the game I played last week, just flipped where it was like I took one person out of action, and that gang was just like, no, we're off.
Yeah,
we're off.
Yeah.
Though somehow my opponent stayed on the board long enough to do, because we were playing intrigues and rackets, so the intrigue was to set fire to terrain in my deployment zone. So he was like, okay, I've lost this game, that's for certain. But I'm going to play for this little intrigue to get extra creds, which was quite hilarious as the cops.
I think Stargrunt is like that scene. I think Stargrunt, when you used to play, it could be a bit like that scene in Blackadder Goes Forth. You go, there's the land we've captured. What scale is that? 1 to 1?
Right.
I think Stargrunt could be like that. There's been loads of fire. Everyone's had their head down, unable to move, and at the end of it, you've realised nothing actually that much has happened.
You know what? I haven't thought about Blackadder in so long, and I remember. I think that's probably the one I watched the most of. Blackadder Goes Forth.
Yeah.
And just how futile it all was.
Yes, absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
So my question is, with all of this, are you going to do one of your own?
That is actually one of the things. Well, I guess Trash Humanism is kind of one of my own, because that's a weird way of like, I basically kind of just befriended through the Discord fan server for Le Destroy, and then learned that Christina and her partner Nathan were also into Kingdom Death, so we just bonded on Kingdom Death over the server, and we're like, okay. They asked me, do you want to write a role-play game? I was like, all right, do that. Yeah, okay. So that's how that went. And then off Eldritch Automata, one of the stretch goals is to write a war game based upon that. So that'll be, I don't know when I've not officially done any proper work on it yet, because, the RPG's not yet shipped to people, so that's their focus right now. But yeah, that will be a war game of mecha versus giant, horrific, monsters.
And if a franchise, be it one that pre-exists already as a role-playing game, or doesn't pre-exist as a role-playing game, came and knocked on your door and said, make us one, what would you drop everything for to do?
I think there's one which is kind of not had anything published for years, and I love. There's a RPG that I would love to do work on a new edition called Unhallowed Metropolis. So it's what's called it's described as Victorian, neo-Victorian gas mask chic.
So that's a sentence.
That is a sentence.
So basically, it's an alternative future where a zombie apocalypse has happened across the world. London is essentially a fortified city. It's all gone neo-Victorian, and due to pollution and everything, everyone's wearing gas masks, and everything's kind of like leather and synthetics because there's horrible acid rain and stuff. And it's a really cool. There's just some really cool stuff in it, and also the fun thing about that is some of the writers for that and the creator for it worked on Warmachine, and you can definitely see kind of like
brilliant
the approach to the world. So that's something I would love to revive. As for an existing IP, that's a hard one. That doesn't have a war game. Not too certain, actually.
It can have a war game, but doesn't have an RPG.
I mean, I already mentioned off the show. Castlevania would be good for an RPG.
Yeah.
Because I've mentioned, with the Ulfenkhan book for Age of Sigmar, which lets you play regular people in Age of Sigmar against vampires, because that's what Ulfenkhan is. I think that's a great game you could use for Castlevania, but also I think Castlevania as a whole setting would be based upon the Netflix series would be kind of fun.
Yeah, fantastic.
Cool.
We have sci-fi fantasy. Someone has asked.
Sci-fi fantasy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a bit hard with this lot, isn't it?
Yeah. You like both.
Don't listen, guys.
It is really tough. I can't answer that because sometimes some sci-fi is fantasy. I mean, look at Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can really draw a dividing line between that. I think it's more if you're going to go hard. Maybe it's a question of how hard do you want your sci-fi or how hard do you want your fantasy, because Lord of the Rings, relatively speaking, is quite a hard fantasy setting versus stuff like this.
Yeah. I still don't. I think I understand what hard fantasy, hard sci-fi, and soft, and so on and so forth.
Hard is basically, do you have? I think generally is if you've got aliens with psychic powers and stuff like that, that's generally because you've gone. We're going to have space elves. Look at Star Trek; it's got space elves.
Yeah.
If it's like The Expanse and basically Expanse is essentially the RPG Traveller.
Yeah.
Where you really care about how much fuel.
Just started watching it again at the moment because my wife said, I really feel like I really should have watched this. And for those who have never watched The Expanse and are thinking about it, and this might go out too late, they're killing the first 3 seasons on Amazon, but leaving seasons 4, 5, and 6.
Yes, because Amazon made those, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So me and my wife are. I seen the first 3 seasons through during COVID. And then for some reason, I know what happened. I went back to work and I didn't keep up with it. So it's going in the next 30 days. So me and my wife yesterday watched 9 out of 10 episodes of the first season.
Sensational work. Yeah.
But The Expanse is really hard sci-fi though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love The Expanse.
Yeah.
Even down to things like, having to put a gum shield in and having an injection when you're going at high speeds and things like that, which is just great.
Yeah.
I love all of that. I love that sort of idea.
Like going into how everything, the nitty gritty.
Yeah, well, the fact, you literally see people rewiring things and nuts and bolts and, and it does momentarily at times, the Expanse go a little bit 18 when everyone's got a screwdriver out. But I also, I love the fact there was a hole in a wall and they covered it with a manual. To keep space out and just put a manual on it. And I love that. Yeah, I quite like my hard sci-fi.
Yeah, brilliant. Some quick fire ones. Best non-big IP, so no Star Wars, Warhammer, etc.
best non-big IP.
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to say Iron Kingdoms because that's easy then. Best non-big IP. I can't even say Vampire the Masquerade because that's fairly big in the world. God, that's a really difficult one. Just trying to think. Big IP. I was struggling to think of. It must be something I've watched recently, or game-wise, or horror. I mean, it's still fairly big. I mean, enjoy watching Interview with the Vampire TV series right now.
Oh,
it's about as close as you'll get to a Vampire the Masquerade TV series. Understandably so, because obviously it's basically what Vampire the Masquerade was based upon. It's unlike anything else that's been out in recent years within that genre, because you only look at like Twilight and the Vampire Chronicles and True Blood. They all kind of hit the same boring notes and don't really kind of get into the being a vampire's crap.
Yeah.
Like, it really sucks.
Yeah.
Yes. They're good series, yeah. I'm really enjoying those.
Fantastic. And then the final question from Sundancer, and of course, best cheese ever.
Best cheese ever.
Come on, you should have come prepped for this. You know it'd come up.
I think good old Brie. Brie's always good.
Oh, Brie's a good shout.
Yeah, Brie's a good
Goes
shout.
on panini quite happily.
Yeah.
Goes on crackers quite happily.
Yeah,
Goes
and then
on
you've
most
got
things.
Yeah.
Loves bacon.
Yeah.
Yes, Brie does love bacon, doesn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
Have a nice relationship. Yeah, I can see the love for Brie. I'm good with that.
I think I'd go Brie. Like it's not necessarily a everyday cheese, but it
It's
goes on
expensive for
so
every day.
much. Yeah, like you can't grate it. That's the downside, I guess.
That is a problem.
True.
Like I don't think I'd have like Brie on. I've never had Brie on toast. Maybe I need to broaden my horizons a bit.
Yeah, on something warm it's good. Just 'cause it
Yeah.
melts a bit.
Because I've had like bacon.
Brie on warmed baguette.
Yes, yeah, I love Brie in a sandwich.
Yeah.
Even a Brie and grape sandwich, they're really good. Sorry, I've got sidetracked.
You've gone down your own cheese rabbit hole there.
I've done my cheese hole. Yeah, brilliant. I think the only thing I was thinking of when we were talking about sort of like TV shows and bits and bobs, I started watching. I had no idea it existed. I found it on Disney Plus. The Americans.
Oh, what a brilliant TV series!
6 seasons of it. It's all on Disney Plus, and it's like Cold War era Russian spies pretending to be Americans, and they have kids that they've had in the US.
Yeah, really massively embedded.
Yeah,
it's very good.
And they're like struggling with, some of them are like, hey, I actually really like America and burgers and cars. Yeah. And then the conflict of just sort of like, killing people for information and this, that, and the other. Yeah. And I binge watched it.
I always just think you think hopefully that money, they must be getting money channeled through from the Kremlin to them, because their wig budget.
Oh, huge.
Their wig budget. I don't know where they I wonder whether in the Americans, it never shows you, but they rent a second house that is just full of wigs and moustaches.
Yeah.
Great show though. Yeah,
yes.
I really like it.
Highly recommend watching that. I've really enjoyed it so far. So.
That'd be a good RPG, wouldn't it?
I'm amazed they haven't done one for Shogun.
Oh, though that would be
really get into the nitty-gritty of that time period without being, appropriative and stereotypical.
Yeah.
That was a fun thing. I was talking to Dave at MS Paints, because he's been to Japan recently. He was saying, because it's quite funny what RPGs are popular in different countries. So D&D is not the big RPG in Japan. The big one is Call of Cthulhu. Which is really interesting, and it explains mostly why Warhammer Fantasy does well there, because Warhammer Fantasy is basically Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same dice system. But the main demographic of people playing RPGs over there is 20-something women. So it's like, can you just imagine? It's like 20-something young Japanese women pretending to be 1920s investigators against eldritch horrors. I was just like, that's just nice to know that the hobby is that expansive.
Yeah.
And the flavour of things out there. Again, not everything is D&D, and I'm glad it's not.
Yes.
And not everything is 40k.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think it'd be really difficult watching a group of young women who generally are far more organised than men anyway, in a very organised country. Just think how well their RPGs would run, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be amazing. Yeah.
Like my child who was at his D&D yesterday, and I said, how did it go? He said, it was good. He said we had this stone puzzle with little pebbles that had to go in a certain place we had to crack. And I went, well, how'd that go? He went, well, it got really harder than it should have been. I went, why was that? He went, I ate one of the pebbles. I went, why? And he went, why not? And I thought, that wouldn't happen in young Japanese lady RPGs, would it?
No, I guess not. I listen. I think I mentioned it before on the podcast quite a bit. There's like what started off as a comedy D&D podcast with like some old sort of like, well, I say old YouTubers, old in YouTube terms, like Freddie Wong and everything, and they're in season 3 now, and they've swapped to the Call of Cthulhu system, and that's really fun. Like, from what I understand with the dice system, you roll a D100 and you have to try and get under your skill level. And that's a really interesting way of doing it. And how, say if, your skill's 50 and you roll a 49, but then you might, later again, you roll a 5 or something, then, that's how you succeed more.
Warhammer Fantasy takes it in a fun way, and why 4th edition is quite a good evolution of the previous ones, because combat is... you're trying to do well against your skill level, and how far below you get is you get a degree of success. So it's based on the difference in the tens. But when it comes to combat, it's that compared to how well your opponent's also done theirs. So you can fail your combat roll, but if you failed less badly than your opponent, you still hit them.
Oh, cool.
So I feel it's very Warhammer. Oh, I failed, but not as badly as you.
Yes.
It's not so more you hit them, but you tripped over on the way in, sort of thing.
You've nipped them just by sheer chance. Again, that's why I find system matters in RPGs. And, it'd be very different playing Warmachine with a percentile system, or it'd be very different playing it with it is different with a dice pool system. I've seen that. It's been the previous edition, or playing 40k using the D&D system. Again, the gameplay would be quite different. And it depends what you're trying to contain within the game.
What's your favourite dice?
Ooh, I'm going to have to say it's the D10. It's quite adaptable. You can use it for dice pools, and you can use it for percentiles. So
very good.
Can I just say about dice? My son talked me into buying him a box, his own dice for D&D.
Oh, yes.
And he came home with them. And I didn't know this was, when you just live in a certain type of environment. My wife didn't know that anything other than a D6 existed. Literally didn't know. I'm not like saying comedy, ha.
No.
My wife went, and he went, and there's a D20. And my wife went, what's a D20? He said, well, and then he went, a dice with 20 sides. And my wife was like, oh, what? And then when we went, she went, and then it was quite funny because I really liked it and understanding how it went, but you can get a D100, you can get a dice with 100 sides. And she laughed like I was making it up, and then did this other thing, which I just thought was funny. She went, how big is it? I like the idea that I'm just going to go into the garden and roll this D100 to see what results I get. And instead of going, instead of, where normal people would go, how would you read it? How small must the numbers be? My wife went the other way. I was just thought it'd be like the size of a medicine ball,
Because you can do D100 as a singular dice, or do 2 like D10s.
Generally done as 2. Because then you can use it as regular D10s. It's accessible in that way. I think also a D10 is quite good if you want to do a scatter die, because it points in a particular way. So doubles for a lot of things. Firm favourite.
Cool. Chatting to the guys from Zero Genesis, and they opted for D10s for their game.
Before we wind up, you also have a podcast, don't you?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
So Darker Days Radio is coming up on, let me think, mostly 16 years old.
Wow. You started it when you were 4.
So I joined the podcast in, gotta be 2000, and I want to say 2009. Mike was there a bit longer than me. It had 2 hosts before it. So originally a World of Darkness and Chronicle, well, what was at the time was New World of Darkness, those game systems. And since then we've kept with that to a point. And then we've expanded out. So we do episodes covering the Warhammer RPGs, where we don't review the books because obviously highly biased. But we look at how to utilize them for your games, talk about like oh, this talks about this part of the world. Well, there's all these tools. This is the story ideas. We've been doing the same slowly with Iron Kingdoms. Because the hosts, we've got Pete, is based in Australia. Chig, Mike, and Crystal, they're based in the US. I think Dave's going to be moving to France. So we are quite global, which means we can get to all manner of events and interview people.
Great.
Generally get invited to be on panels to talk about RPGs, about horror gaming. And we've also published a few things. Drive Through RPG does like community content ones, so you get a cut, and obviously whoever the game is for gets their cut. So we've put out a number of scenarios and booklets for Vampire the Masquerade and Chronicles of Darkness and so forth. So, and I will say, if you want to get into writing, that's a really good way of doing it, because you build up your own portfolio of work, and then people go, oh, well, that's great. Do you want to write for us? And you're like, yeah, please. That'd be great.
Fantastic. Yeah, great way of getting yourself out there, I guess. Yeah.
You can also do that for card games, and I think you also miniature games you can self-publish through Drive Through RPG. If you go miniatures agnostic, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's even easier with STLs. Then you can team up with a particular person. Go, I like your sculpts. Can I write a game for it? And they'll be like, okay,
yeah,
do it.
Yeah,
fantastic, amazing,
cool.
I feel somewhat educated, more on dice systems and different games, and I'm
very much so. As somebody
reawakened my love of RPGs.
As somebody who's not an RPG, I'm going to say what I always say to my little boy at the end of the day when he comes over to my shop: what do you know more about than you did this morning? And I think this interview chat, I very much know a lot more now than I did when I started it.
Absolutely.
So cool. Put this out as a prize.
Yes.
To our Patreons or to everyone?
Patrons, I believe.
Patrons.
Yeah.
Right. Can you give us a not hugely difficult question, but can you give us a nice sort of 40k question for somebody to win this?
Oh, okay. That's
put you on the spot.
Let's go with which chapter are the which legion are the absolvers a chapter derived from?
Sensational.
Cool. And if you listen to the show, it was said.
It was in there.
It was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
amazing.
We'll stick this in the post.
Yes.
To the first successful answer we get.
Yeah.
Or we going to put in names in a hat?
Yeah, we'll do names in a hat.
There should be
names in a Marine's helmet.
People might get it right.
yeah. So probably let's go with Nate. We'll go with go names in the helmet.
Yes.
Cool. Brilliant. So good luck, and thank you very much for donating that to the show. It's very, very kind.
Very generous. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
It's been an absolutely eye-opening pleasure, and I really hope it encourages more people to play Warmachine, because from what you've told me about, come to ChillCon.
Yes, there we go.
ChillCon's banging on the door, 22nd of March, if I remember right.
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
Lead and Steel is also on the weekend after at Sheffield at the Crooks Social Club, so that it's going to be some old hammer. But I was like, can I run some Warmachine? They're like, yeah, go on then. So
excellent,
brilliant. And then are you at a Warhammer event?
Yes. Oh, I totally forgot. So I am planning. I should be locking in all the details. I will confirm on Discord if people want to sign up for that. I'm going to the Warhammer World anniversary event coming up, so I'll be running demos of Age of Sigmar Soulbound.
2nd of March, isn't it?
Yes. And then
I know that because it's my wife's birthday, and that's why I won't be there.
Another one is in. Hold on, let me find it on my social medias, because I can never remember this. Like I said, too much is going on. Obviously, I'm going to try and be at UK Games Expo in some capacity. I might be there representing Gehenna Gaming, or I might be going around with a video camera and taking interviews.
Well, I plan to be at Birmingham, so I will see you there.
And I will mostly annoy the guys at Beast of War, because they always get me on there because they live stream their official live stream. They always go like, they're like, oh, you're about, do you want to fill some dead air for us? I'm like, what can I plug today?
Absolutely right.
The other event coming up is, let me find it. Yes, here we go. So there is, on the 3rd of May, as part of an event that's called Dracula Comes to Derby. So it's an academic event. They're looking at the impact of Dracula on literature and so forth.
Cool.
They're doing it as an anniversary for when they had the first theatre play of Dracula was there 100 years ago.
Oh, cool.
So they're running a games day of vampire-related RPGs on the 3rd of May. And so I'm running a day-long Vampire the Masquerade demo. And obviously there's D&D games, and Eat the Reich is another vampire RPG, and something called, what's the other one? Is it called, no, it's not called Chill, I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, there's a whole host of people running things. And there's even a miniature, there's a vampire miniature you can get if you turn up.
Ooh, there we go. Excellent.
Excellent.
Amazing. Have you got these bits and bobs on your website, or?
Yeah, and I'll make sure it's all on. You get all the show notes.
And your website's called?
www.darker-days.org. You can find me by just looking for christopher-handley.com. That's for my personal blog.
Amazing.
Excellent.
Put some links in the description and people can find you.
Cool.
Sounds great.
So I'd like to say, firstly, thank you to all our Patreons. Thank you for anybody who watched this episode. If you haven't come across us before, please like, subscribe, notification bells. We have element links, affiliate links for the different people we're in. I was going to say in bed with, but that sounds a bit saucy. That we're involved with.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound much better
We've
involved with, does
We've
it?
got a situationship.
We've got a situationship. And last of all, Chris, a massive thank you, because the amount of stuff you told us about, I'm in awe with the amount that must be knocking around inside your skull.
Yeah, it's a bit hard sometimes. Yeah.
I've had to lose information just to get Kill Team in.
Yeah.
Yes.
I now don't know how to change a wheel on a car anymore. I used to, but since I started playing Kill Team, I don't know anymore.
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
Well, thanks so much, man.
Right.
It's really
It's great,
appreciated.
thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks to you all for watching.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.